So in our last session, we ended with this idea of the sky-like vastness of our minds and also the sky-like vastness of Tara, that she can take on so many forms. And my teacher, Khenpo Sherab Sangpo, talks about, in emptiness, everything is possible. And so this is a big, vast view, and it's also very encouraging. In other words, emptiness is a field of awareness, a field of intelligence that knows itself to be pure potential. In other ways, it knows itself to be this open, vast space that can manifest in any form. And so emptiness is really a radical openness that births limitless forms. And so, again, I was talking to you about, at the end, about these dakinis, these sky-goers who dance the dance of life. And I think that is, again, coming back into the mandala of Tara. We want to come back into this space of openness, which is also the openness of our hearts. And we're going to keep on talking about this over and over again, because if there's one feeling of energy or one feeling in yourself that I'd like you to take away from the retreat is starting to loosen in your mind a feeling of limitations that you place on yourself, and also therefore also limitations that you place on others. Because I think when we start relaxing a little bit and have a little bit more curiosity and a little bit more openness, it really transforms our relationships and transforms about how we start to see situations. We kind of get that pause just for a snap second before we habitually react in frustration or anger to someone. If we can get that pause just for a moment, which comes from practicing spaciousness, this can really, really, really save us from having to clean up a big mess. So the payoff of opening up and relaxing a little bit our preconceived ideas can be really big. Really, really big. And if you've ever said something you've really regretted, which I know we all have. I mean, I know that I can recall some of those moments, right away. Tara is also, that energy of spaciousness is, and arising in new forms continually, is also about forgiveness. So it's also that aspect of ourselves that we know that whatever has happened, that sort of suffering or that anger is part of a big field, and that, as Kim talked about last night, through all experiences we learn something. So again, that knowledge of suffering, that knowledge of joy is related, and that allows us to also practice forgiveness with ourselves and others. So I think this is another side of Tara, the benefits of Tara practice that can really come out in our lives. So this impermanent, ever-changing energy of our life is actually deeply healing. So again, when we are deeply, deeply suffering, we embrace the mother of change because we know that our suffering will pass. And this is a big relief, right? We know that life is going to go on, and that we really like impermanence because we want things to change. But in Buddhism, we talk about suffering arising is at that time when we're deeply attached to an experience of pleasure, of something that we really like, and we don't want to let it go. We don't want it to change. We want it to last forever. And so because the nature of reality is impermanent, it's ever-changing, ever-arising, because grasping onto something and fighting impermanence is ultimately fighting the nature of reality, this is what causes suffering in our life. This is like one of the fundamental causes of suffering, is not recognizing impermanence, emptiness, the nature of interconnectedness. So White Tara really teaches us to be gentle and loosen our grip of ego control and loosen our grip of attachment to experiences that we judge as either good, pleasurable, and also in the reverse, bad, horrible, things like that. So it allows us to relax a little bit. And as you all know, relaxing is one of the most rejuvenating things from the body. It's really rejuvenating for the mind. And so this is a little bit of one of the lessons that we can take away, that, as my teacher says, impermanence is always a blessing. always a blessing, even when it appears not to be. And so, for example, my mother had cancer for a number of years, and although I was really sad when she died, I was so glad she was no longer suffering. So we can have that experience of intense attachment, of not wanting to let somebody go. And then there's part of us that can also recognize at the same time that that impermanence, that change, that passing is a big blessing. And Buddhism asks us to stay with that tension, to stay with that contradiction, and to allow that contradiction of experiencing both of those things at one time to be present. So again, I really want to encourage you not to think that Tara is asking ourselves to fundamentally change what we label in ourselves as bad. What she's asking us to do is open up enough to know that this perception of bad is relative. And in certain situations, this habit of yourself that you really don't like about yourself may arise as exactly what you need in that moment. So, to give an example, motivation, we set our motivation for this retreat. Every action that we do, if it is based on love, if it is based on compassion, has what my teacher calls a virtuous or a positive outcome. And even actions, for example, that we normally would condemn as unethical, can in certain circumstances be exactly the most ethical or the most compassionate thing to do. And I think about this, about stories about mercy killing in Vietnam. When I really heard about this hit me really, hard. And that is, of course, when soldiers have responded to other soldiers' requests to, I know you can't get me out of here, but I don't want to go on. So again, what is the motivation behind that? The motivation behind that is not to harm them. The motivation is to release them from something that they're deathly afraid of and would cause them potentially great sadness. And that's the way I look at it. You might look at it differently, but in the moment, the motivation that we have really, really does determine not only the way that we look, but it determines the energy of that. And all of us have to give ourselves the freedom, moment by moment, to know that that's the only thing that we can do, is make the best choices we can make moment by moment. And so Buddhism is not saying give up your ethics, but it is saying be skillful. Be skillful in each moment and allow that complexity, that suffering and happiness are two sides of the same coin, and they can be in the same moment. And I think this is really wisdom. Wisdom is being able to look at each situation in its absolute particularities and to be able to, in some ways, draw out of yourself the most compassionate response. So that is one of the things that we're training with in White Tara, is to really, through meditation, but also through generating compassion, is becoming more skillful. And so one of the pairs in Buddhism, we have many, many pairs. We have the union of wisdom and skillful means. Wisdom is understanding the big picture, and skillful means is knowing how to transfer that wisdom into the particulars of life, into what is the most compassionate response. And so again, probably any meditation practice you do, but especially one that's focused on generating bodhicitta, generating the mind of enlightenment, generating wisdom, generating compassion, can really help you transform your life. And it doesn't have to be extreme examples either. For example, just think about a mother or a father who normally would not want to grab their child and really forcefully maybe yell at them very strong. But if that child is about to run out in front of traffic, that is exactly the response that they should take at that moment. They shouldn't hesitate. They should grab and yell. So that's, again, maybe a much less charged example of skillful means in action, and the fact that relativity does not mean giving up any form of bearing. It's actually a really extremely finely knowledge of where you're at in an orientation of a big system where anything can arise. And so that's the fact that we don't lose grounding. We gain actually within ourselves when we practice a center real center of orientation that we can start relying on. Just like if I went into the boundary waters, which I can't even imagine because I'm the most orientationless person as far as directions, I would really want a good compass. And what I'd really want is Kim to guide me in there. But if I didn't have Kim, I would need to get some good maps, some good compass, and be prepared for that. And so that's what meditation does, is it prepares us to be better equipped in life. So now I want to kind of go back to this concept of rainbow energy for a moment. And I have no problem being airy-fairy. I love unicorns. I mean, I have no problem with that. So we'll talk about rainbow energy. So Martine and I were sitting and watching the waterfalls at Temperance River State Park. And I can't say, but they just seem magnificent to me. There just seems like there's a lot of water running down there right now. And we were sitting there for a long time, and suddenly I calmed my mind enough to actually start seeing those rainbows of sprays, that energy coming off of the water, which took me a while. I mean, but that's what happens. We kind of settle our mind down and we start seeing more of the details, the particulars of life. And, that was really a display of beautiful, beautiful light. It was spontaneous. Everything was free-flowing because it's the nature of water to flow. It's also the nature of light to reflect. So one of the things that we talk about in Buddhism is that our minds do not need to create anything new. The nature, when we start observing something carefully, we start to know the nature of it. And that's, on some level, we can get all the science we want, and I love science, and I need to learn more about how crystals reflect light, and because I have sort of a sense of it. But at the same time, one of the simple answers is that it's a crystal's nature to reflect light. And so you can take that apart into as much detail as you can get, but that's just its nature. And so one of the things that we really realize is that the nature of white Tara, or the nature of, in some ways, the nature of mind, is just an open nature that has the potential to reflect, like a prism does, this rainbow light. Our minds have a very open nature that can actually reflect or perceive or experience whatever arises. But oftentimes we don't, really, again, perceive something because we have preconceived ideas of it, so we can't even see what's coming up. And that maybe is just the reality. That maybe is our nature. But I think in some ways we also know that our perceptions change. And so, again, working with white Tara, it reminds us, what I'm talking about is she as a symbol in her white body. You should really visualize her white body as crystalline, as not a flat color, but as almost like liquid light, if you could imagine light having a shape, and then visualize that her body like a crystal that has light coming out. And by doing that, it's also training you to experience, your mind and your perception. It's reducing your attachment to all of the forms that we see as being inherent, as being solid, and being fixed. And again, this is part of this openness that happens. So we're going to start getting into a little bit about how we start to use the symbols of this practice to reflect back on openness, on the nature of reality and things like that. So we're going to start going into the actual symbolism of the practice right now. So the first thing I'd like to do is, and if you want to get your practice text in front of you right now, I'm going to start going through sections by sections. So in refuge, we recite the lines 3 times. I and all sentient beings take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, Tara, and her mandala. And first of all, the Buddha is a being who obtained enlightenment, but it's also, Buddha symbolizes our enlightened mind. The Dharma symbolizes the teachings of the Buddha It also, Dharma means the word, in Sanskrit means the word phenomena. And so it has many, many different meanings, but one of the things that we take refuge in, to take refuge is to rely on, is the teachings of wisdom, the teachings of these wisdom traditions. It also is reminding us, when we know that Dharma means phenomena, that life is a teaching, that all the phenomena around us are teachings as well. And then Sangha is the group of practitioners. Another word for that would be meditation community. And so when we take refuge, we rely not only on the teachings and not only on ultimate wisdom, understanding that we rely on other people who are walking on the same path as us. And so very much having a community can be a great support. And then in this practice, we rely on Tara. And Tara is, at this point, embodies the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. She's the symbol for all of those united, and her mandala. And I want to talk a little bit about a mandala, because the mandala principle, it plays a big part in these type of practices in Buddhism, which are part of the Vajrayana, or the adamantine or diamond vehicle. And again, diamond is another metaphor for the nature of mind, indestructible, unchanging in its essence of being able to embrace, reflect all this rainbow light, being able to have all forms arise. So let me talk a little bit about the mandala. We've already talked about entering the space of Tara's mandala. And we also talked about Tara's mandala, visualizing it as a sacred circle. And mandala is a Sanskrit word that carries many meanings. It can mean literally a circle. But in this practice, it means specifically an enlightened atmosphere, an enlightened environment. And it is an enlightened environment of what's called a yidam, which means a meditational deity. And you need to know that a meditational deity becomes a focus for our meditation. She's a focus point or an object that we can place our minds on as we meditate. Because as many of you know, oftentimes we have an object that we set our minds down. It can be an object of sound, so we can use mantra, an object of a Buddha that we visualized, and it can also be, we can also have meditations where we don't have an object, which are more formless. But in this case, when we enter Tara's mandala and take refuge in that, we are taking refuge in her enlightened atmosphere of her teachings and of her realization. So I really like Gaelic Rinpoche's commentary on mandala. So I'm going to read you a portion of it from his book called Healing and Self-Healing Through White Tara. He says, what Buddha has shared in the Tantras, and this is a Tantra, this sacred text that we're practicing is a Tantra, which means a continuum. It's a continuum of the mind, of the wisdom of Tara. What Buddha has shared in the Tantras is about actually creating a completely different environment called mandala and completely different inhabitants, which we may refer to as deities. The drawing of mandalas that we see in books are the architectonic representations, and they are drawings where if you see them there, you might have seen a sand mandala or a picture. They're circles, and inside of them they have geometric forms that if you would pop them up in 3D reality, they become these sacred space or palaces or sacred buildings. So really a mandala on one level, when it's flat, is like a blueprint that you can pop up in reality. So the drawings of mandalas that we see in books are the architectonic representations of that particular pure atmosphere. The drawings of the mandala explain to you the doorways, the roads, the path, the space. But a mandala is nothing but a psychic map and an introduction to different persons. And what he means by psychic, which is not like reading other people's minds, he means an interior space of the mind. So the persons and the deities of the mandala that were introduced when we are introduced to a Tibetan yidam, such as White Tara, these are what are called commitment deities. So Yi of yidam refers to the mind. It refers to the wisdom mind of Tara. It also refers to your wisdom mind, your enlightened mind when you are relating to her as a meditational object. And Dham, the second part of Yid Dham, refers to commitment. And so when we enter the mandala of Tara by practicing white Tara, we are making certain commitments to ourself of realizations of body, speech, and mind. Of course, these are 3 levels of our being. And what we're making a commitment to is to try to unify them as much as we can. And so again, have more of a non-dual experience of reality, not be dividing things up so much. And so we're really trying to unify them, and we're also trying to optimize them, increase our capability of understanding the energy of our body, understanding the way that our mind works, understanding the energy of our speech. So we are committing to practice the orientation, the way of being of white Tara in her mandala, and we accomplish our commitments to white Tara as a Yidam and her enlightened atmosphere via meditation. So that is the purpose of meditation. So how do we accomplish the commitments of body, speech, and mind? In this practice, we accomplish the body by visualizing the form of white Tara as vividly as we can. This also helps us when we encounter other bodies to also experience them as vividly as we can. But by training in visualizing and understanding the ability of the mind to work extremely detailed, it helps us to live life more vividly. We accomplish by the speech by learning the language of white Tara practice and the sound of her mantra by reciting white Tara's mantras, Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha, and then the long life mantra. And we accomplish the mind by establishing our mind in the Bodhi mind, or the enlightened mind of white Tara, which we talked about as the expression of the energy of compassion. So that's how we accomplish body, speech, and mind in this practice. And so this practice is a very holistic practice. It's allowing us to work with each part of our nature of our being separately, but ideally, as you are reciting the text, you are vividly visualizing white Tara in the space before you, and when you do the mantras, you are able to combine both of those together. And when people really practice this deeply for a long time, they can so vividly be in the presence of Tara and her mandala that many of them experience her as being right there, as being fully present, as real as Marmy is sitting right there in front of me. And that is really an incredible experience. I mean, there's practitioners that have done that, and they talk about that as at some point they may also start experiencing their enlightenment via practicing Tara so deeply. They start to understand the nature of themselves at such a subtle level that they really have a sense of their full capacity in life. So it's a powerful practice. So when we recite the lines of refuge, as I said, refuge is to rely on something. And so when we recite the lines of refuge, what we're doing is formally saying, I am now beginning a practice where I'm going to rely on the enlightened energy of Tara. And so the more you understand Tara, when you recite the lines of refuge, the more you can enter into this space that you create where you are entering into a time period during your day when you are dwelling with or abiding with your own wisdom. That is what we do with prayer, right? Any form of prayer that you do is carving out time when you directly relate to your connection with the sacred. And anytime you pray, you are settling your body, you're bringing it into one place, you're bringing your mind into focus, and you are at that point, if you're praying to someone or to an idea of deity or God or any kind of great spirit, at that point you're making a direct connection, and that's another word for communion, right? We're communing at that point. So this is a practice essentially of prayer, as of communing with white Tara, with enlightenment mind. If you have a root teacher, and root teacher in Buddhism has a specific meaning, it means a teacher with whom you have a close connection and who has pointed out to you the nature of your mind, you very much should think of Tara as your root teacher sitting right in front of you, as pointing out to you the nature of your mind. So you can also practice white Tara as a practice of devotion to a very important teacher in your life. With the next lines of the practice, we generate bodhicitta for the benefit of all sentient beings. In order to obtain the state of perfection, I shall practice the sadhana of Tara. At this point, you are remembering to embody big mind and big heart. So generating bodhicitta is generating the mind of enlightenment. At this point, you are arising as embodying your intention to help relieve suffering in the world. At this point, you should really, really take on the mantle or the clothing or donning the energy of that vow that you have, that aspiration that you have. And, bodhisattvas are really heroic beings who, again, as I said, decide, I am going to be the cause to my greatest capacity for other people's happiness, for other people's well-being. And so when you recite those lines of generating bodhicitta, in order to obtain the state of perfection, what is the state of perfection in Buddhism? The state of perfection in Buddhism is having this wisdom in each particular situation that arises upon us in the path of life, to know how to skillfully embrace it and how to skillfully help when you can help, and also how to skillfully refrain from harm. So sometimes no action is the best action. And that is what the state of perfection is. Especially for us, because that's what we need in our life, right? When we do that, that is really what we're aspiring for as bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas have really big mind, so they've envisioned this on a profound scale. They wish that they will have unlimited capacity to help unlimited beings in all times. So this is a big mind, this is a big orientation. So there's 3 types of bodhisattvas in Buddhism, and I want to tell you about the different types. So when you generate bodhicitta, you're saying you'll practice Tara until you can guide sentient beings like Tara. And Tara is a bodhisattva, and so there are 3 types of bodhisattvas. The first one is the king-like bodhisattva, who aspires to become enlightened, a Buddha, as soon as possible, and then help sentient beings to achieve the same level of realization. So this is the king-like bodhisattva. The second one is the ferryman, or the ferrywoman bodhisattva, who aspires to achieve Buddhahood along with other sentient beings by arriving on the other shore together. So the ferryman is like a guide that in his or her boat takes all sentient beings and arrives at the same time. And then there's the final one, which is the shepherd-like bodhisattva, who aspires to delay Buddhahood until all other sentient beings achieve Buddhahood. So if you've practiced Christianity, and I'm sure in other traditions there may be this, but I'm not aware of it, you will recognize Jesus as the great shepherd. We've heard this before. So Jesus has also made a commitment to love all beings unconditionally and to guide them in returning to their own Christ-like heart or their own Christ mind. So I think if we're open, we can really see that there's a connection between the bodhisattva aspiration in Buddhism and the aspiration of Jesus as a savior, of why he took embodiment in human form. And I also think that we probably could recognize this in all of the sacred wisdom traditions, this same kind of aspiration to help other beings unconditionally. I mean, this is in some ways the essence of love. So I just want to point out to that as you're practicing this, if you have other spiritual traditions with which you have a strong connection, you can keep this in mind as you go through the practice, because the practice is trying to give you a structure for going through certain states of mind in which you open up your heart. And so these states of mind are not specific to Buddhism, they're universal on a certain level. And so the more you practice the start and the more you learn about other cultures and religions, the more you can bring that into the wisdom of your practice. So in the Nyingma lineage, which is the teaching lineage that Khenpo Sherab Sangpo, my own teacher, practices in and also teaches in, he's told us that the highest aspiration is that of the shepherd-like bodhisattva, who makes sure that all the sheep arrive back in the pen and then is the last one to close the door and then probably jumps into the pen themselves. So really he encourages us that bodhicitta has to do with placing others' welfare above our own, and that this is really has a great impact on us because, of course, the first thing that we always think about is our own self. And as soon as we think about our own self, which in some cases is absolutely necessary, I mean, if you're in a burning building, get out of there. We're not talking about, we have to use skillful means. But one of the biggest causes of suffering is our ignorance in thinking that we are a separate self from everything else around us. So practicing the welfare of others is a way of retraining our mind to lessen this attachment on ourselves and lessen this, again, this rigid idea that somehow I'm up here and you're out there and we aren't absolutely interconnected right now. Just think about it. I can't arise as a teacher without all of you arising as students. Again, teacher and student are like this. So this is the big mind of the Bodhisattva, and when we generate bodhicitta, that's what we're doing. And so now we're at the third part of our practice, which is the prayer of the four boundless qualities. And we recite that in the practice by saying, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be apart from the sublime bliss that is free from suffering. And may they remain in a state of equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. We could spend an entire retreat just line by line examining this entire prayer of wishing all sentient beings immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, and immeasurable equanimity. This is really the heart of Buddhism right here. So if you only have time to practice very short in your day, recite this prayer 3 times. That's it. Right there. And if you really feel it deeply, that's a complete practice in itself. So today, though, I would like to point out the last line. May they remain in a state of equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. And this is an immeasurable equanimity. So the very heart essence of Tara as the great mother, the mother of all Buddhas, the mother of all wisdom, enlightened wisdom, is her measureless equanimity. Her equal regard of all sentient beings as her children whom she loves impartially. So this is the person who we know of, if you've ever watched the film Dhamma Brothers, who is going into prisons and teaching meditation to people who are on death row. I mean, they're never going to get out of their cells. They're never not going to be on death row. But this is the person who doesn't give up on them and says that despite no matter the horrible things that they have done, inside of them they have wisdom, they have compassion, they have love. It's just covered up. This is equanimity. This is really unconditional love. This is seeing all beings as equal in their capacity to uncover their wisdom, to uncover their loving kindness and compassion. So Tara's great equanimity is that she has released the need to choose between her children. And so as we talked about very early, and I'm looking at Gary because he has a great garden and he's a good composter. When we talked about the fact that in garbage we see the rose, and in the rose we see the garbage, that this is this interbeing. Tara has really given up choosing between garbage children and rose children. And this is a profound view. This is the view that we're cultivating with this practice. Because her ultimate view is beyond duality. I mean, she sees their interconnectedness. So this is like the shepherd-like bodhisattva with the vast mind and the big heart. So when we're praying the prayer of the four boundless qualities, again, like I said, you have to have equanimity at the end, because you can wish people love, you can wish people compassion, you can wish people joy, but if you don't do it with equanimity, you're still holding back part of yourself that doesn't really recognize Tara's mandala and recognize our interconnectedness. And so it's really important. Equanimity is such a strong practice in Buddhism, and it's freeing. It's absolutely freeing. It's one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself. It gives you deep relaxation, deep joy. So I'll tell you a small story, not because I want to increase my pride, but just because I experienced this. I was in LA and I was going to get my nails done, and a homeless woman approached me, and I absolutely knew she was going to ask me for money. But what I didn't expect is she was going to ask me for a hug. And so I gave her money, because I always see people who ask me for money as angels who are asking me to practice generosity, or reminding me of generosity, and I've never regretted it. And fortunately, they come up to me as single people, and I can afford that generosity. So I'm realistic. But when she asked me for a hug, I didn't even think about it. I just embraced her, and it just spontaneously came out of me. And then later on, I realized that that was a result of my equanimity practice. It's not that I'm a saint. It's just that I've really been working on this, and I've been cultivating seeing the entire world as the mandala of Tara, as a pure land, and seeing everyone who approaches me as Tara. So this is the point in my practice that I'm working on right now. I work on many different things, but I always choose something that I'm concentrating on, and that's what I'm working on right now. So I was just, afterwards, I was joyful, and I felt like she had given me a gift. You know, she had given me the gift of realizing that some of that practice was starting to change my view of reality. So I felt really joyful. And also that weekend I was going to receive a Tara empowerment, kind of a teaching where someone who has really realized this practice empowers other people to practice it and shares their wisdom of it. And she was my welcoming committee. I mean, I carried that energy of the mandala of Tara into that practice, and it was really wonderful. So the gift, in that case, the giver and the receiver of the gift, was this incredible unity. I mean, I couldn't tell the difference between who was giving whom what gift. She really was wonderful. So that is the practice of equanimity, and it's important when we start out this practice that we move into that space and try to remind ourselves that that is the energy of Tara. So let's see. I think we should practice now at this point. So let's practice together. So again, refuge 3 times. As soon as you're ready. Okay. I and all sentient beings take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, Tara, and her mandala. I and all sentient beings take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, Tara, and her mandala. I and all sentient beings take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, Tara, and her mandala. Generating bodhicitta 3 times. For the benefit of all sentient beings, in order to obtain the state of perfection, I shall practice the sadhana of Tara. For the benefit of all sentient beings, in order to obtain the state of perfection, I shall practice the sadhana of Tara. For the benefit of all sentient beings, in order to obtain the state of perfection, I shall practice the sadhana of Tara. For the benefit of all sentient beings, in order to obtain the state of perfection, I shall practice the sadhana of Tara. Prayer of the 4 boundless qualities 3 times. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be apart from the sublime bliss that is free from suffering. May they remain in a state of equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be apart from the sublime bliss that is free from suffering. May they remain in a state of equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be apart from the sublime bliss that is free from suffering. And may they remain in a state of equanimity, free from attachment and aversion to those near and far. So front generation of white Tara. Om Maha Shunyata Janavajra Sobhawa Atma Ko Hang. In the space before me appears a white lotus with a moon disk upon it. The love and compassion of all the enlightened beings appear from this as noble wish-fulfilling Tara. She sits on a lotus and moon cushion, a luminous moon halo at her back. Youthful and radiant, her right hand gestures into an invitation to liberation. Her left hand, holding an ipala flower, indicates the protection of the three jewels, giving courage and assurance to those dominated by fear. Mantra recitation, longevity practice, and healing activities. Again, bring to mind the person, animal, people, planet for whom you're practicing. Visualize them really vividly for a moment. Feel like as much as white Tara is sitting in front of you, that they're sitting in front of you. Be happy that you have an opportunity to connect with them, to love with them. Feel that joy right now. Know that they're there. Have no doubt about that. Okay, now recite with me. Brilliant light. It's from the syllable Tam within her heart, collecting back the essence of inexhaustible vitality and powerful blessings of body, speech, and mind. Energy streams forth from Tara's heart and body. I and all beings absorb this nectar of light and are cleansed and revitalized, obtaining the realization of deathlessness. Tara's mantra 3 times. Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha. Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha. Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha. Long life mantra also 3 times. Om Tare Tutare Ture Mama Ayar Jana Punye Pitang Kudure Soha. Om Tare Tutare Ture Mama Ayar Jana Punye Pitang Kudure Soha. Om Tare Tutare Ture Mama Ayar Jana Punye Pitang Kudure Soha. And then Tara's prayer 3 times in English. Illustrious Tara, please be aware of me. Remove my obstacles. Quickly grant my excellent aspirations. Illustrious Tara, please be aware of me. Remove my obstacles. Quickly grant my excellent aspirations. Illustrious Tara, please be aware of me. Remove my obstacles. Quickly grant my excellent aspirations. Session conclusion. All phenomenal appearances become the mandala of noble Tara. Everything dissolves into light and dissolves into noble Tara. Noble Tara dissolves into my heart center and protects me. Okay, now we're going to offer the 7-limb prayer, and I just want to offer a little bit of instruction here. Some of you are practicing Guru Yoga, which is the union with the teacher's wisdom mind. We're practicing Guru Yoga right here in a sense that we're aspiring to unite our mind with the wisdom mind of Tara, trying to recognize our wisdom mind very clearly. And so this 7-limb prayer is a short form of Guru Yoga. it has aspects of, in the first line, I bow down in body, speech, and mind, of offering prostrations, which is a sign of respect for this wisdom, that it's something very valuable and that we treasure it. The second line, I present offerings, both actually arranged. This is like the shrine. Right here is an actually arranged offering. It's present. But you can also mentally create offerings. In Buddhism, we talk about vast offerings. So as much beautiful things, anything that you have of value, try to multiply it. So if you think of a flower, think of vast flowers, and you offer that. And the reason that you offer is a practice of generosity, actually. You're taking anything that you love, that you're really attached to, or anything that you really want to have a lot of in your life, and you're offering it up to the entire, all sentient beings, and you're particularly offering it up to your teacher, whom you really admire. But this is a practice of generosity right here. Then I purify all diluted actions. This is a very short form of Vajrasattva, if you know what Vajrasattva is. It's a short form of realizing that we can make the intention to recognize the purity of everyone around us. That releases us from thinking that we're in a place of impurity. We can also, it's a forgiveness practice. At this point, we can do a quick form of thinking, I know what I need to change, I'm planning on doing it, and knowing that you do it, and at that point feel like you can move on in life. And then after you've done that, sort of perform this confession and realization that you don't want to continue that action, then you rejoice in all pure activities. You kind of get really happy, because you see everything around you as being people doing the best they can, doing the best that you can. And so you take a moment to rejoice in that you've been willing to give up your delusions. So I love rejoicing. I think it's really important. It's the energy that keeps us going. Then I request you to remain until total enlightenment. Again, in Buddhism, we have a very strong feeling that our teachers over many, many, many lifetimes keep on coming back to guide us again and again. You can have a sense that anyone who has taught you a wisdom tradition, who has taught you a sacred form of spirituality, that even if you don't have a sense of reincarnation, that's fine, let it go, it doesn't matter. But you can have a sense that that wisdom tradition has been passed down, and that at this moment it's still available to you, and that you've connected with it. And so you're asking at this point that those wisdom traditions continue to flourish. We do it in Guru Yoga as a specific way of hoping that Khenpo Sherab Sangpo, my teacher, continues to flourish. But you should feel free to think of any teacher of any spiritual wisdom tradition that you really hope continues to flourish. And then I request your wise and compassionate guidance, which is exactly what it says. Teach me, be in front of me, stay in my heart, let me think about you, let me remember the wisdom teachings I've received. And then I dedicate my merit for the benefit of all beings. Again, this is another practice of any positivity, any virtue, any happiness, joy that comes out of this short practice. At that point, you give it away again. And you say, may that realization dawn in everyone's mind. May they make a connection with their hearts. May they really recognize the interconnectedness of all. So that's the 7-limb prayer. That's what we're doing when we do it. And that's, again, in Buddhism, we can, in any probably tradition, you can unpack these teachings and really reflect on them and meditate on them. So you could think about generosity, for example. If you wanted to pause and think about, I present offerings, both actually arranged and mentally created, you can always pause in the practice and actually sit with that for a while and think, what would I offer if I could? This also helps you open up your wallet and give the person $20 because you can do it at that moment, you know. So you can pause any time at this practice and sit with it and work on something like generosity if you want to. So let's offer the 7-limb prayer. I bow down in body, speech, and mind. I present offerings both actually arranged and mentally created. I purify all deluded actions. I rejoice in all pure activities. I request you to remain until total enlightenment. I request your wise and compassionate guidance. I dedicate my merit for the benefit of all beings. Dedication of merit. By this virtuous practice, may I quickly attain the realization of noble Tara. Accomplishing this, may I liberate all sentient beings without exception into the same realization. Closing prayers. Let's pause at this point, and I want to explain a little bit more about the second line of the first prayer. May I attain in each and every life the sublime virtues of existence and peace. Existence and peace. When we talked about the shepherd-like bodhisattva, this does specifically refer to a feeling that life is a continuity, and also feeling like that it's very possible that we all have known each other before in different forms, and that we have had teachers that have come and continually taught us. The bodhisattva makes the aspiration not to go into permanent nirvana, not to reside completely in a space of enlightenment. They make the aspiration to obtain the sublime virtue of existence. And existence means coming to teach people. It means taking on a body, existence. And peace, which means that while they are coming into the sphere of dualistic suffering and happiness, where people are really struggling because they don't recognize the non-dual nature of reality, that they will take on existence, but that their wisdom mind will remain in a state of absolute peace. So they have the capacity, through understanding wisdom, the nature of reality, to help in any way possible in a selfless and ultimately highly generous way. So when we're praying at this point, may I attain in each and every life the sublime virtues of existence and peace, this is a prayer of Ju Mipam that he composed, who is a great Buddhist teacher, a bodhisattva. He was also one of the lineage teachers of Khenpo Sherab Sangpo, and his aspiration was not to, was never to leave his students. So we're reciting his aspiration at this point. May I attain in each and every life the sublime virtues of existence and peace. May I remain unendingly, unceasingly interconnected with all of life. And may I be peaceful about that. May I know that that's the nature of reality. May I have the capacity to rise in whatever way helps. So this is another prayer of the Bodhisattva. And then he says, may I pursue the flawless mindset of altruism. Altruism, of course, is great compassion, the mind of Bodhicitta. And working for the welfare of others on a vast scale. And may I not put limitations on this. This is great equanimity, right? So this is actually another prayer of the Bodhisattva. And I really love it. I think it's incredibly beautiful. And then, again, Shantideva's prayer, through this very merit of mine, may every single sentient being eliminate all forms of negativity and practice virtue forevermore. This is another prayer of the four immeasurables. May my realization, may my positive actions awaken everyone else to their potential for the same. And then the last one is, I cannot remember who this one. This is asking again, may Supreme Precious Bodhicitta, may the mind of enlightenment take birth in everyone's heart where it hasn't taken birth before. And where it has taken birth, may it never stop, may it never disappear, but continue to grow forevermore. So these are all three closing prayers essentially about generating bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, and taking on this aspect of being the ultimate helper, really wanting to serve other sentient beings. So let's pray this right now, and then the last one we pray 3 times. And whenever we pray 3 times, there's a reason behind it. We have, again, remember we talked about those commitments of body, speech, and mind. When you pray a prayer 3 times, the first time you're reciting it as a commitment on the level of body. The second time you recite it on the level of speech, and on the third time you recite it on the level of mind. And why is that? Because our energy expresses itself as physical form, embodiments, it expresses itself as speech, and it expresses itself as thoughts or subtle energy of the mind. And so in the Buddhism, we're constantly trying to do what's called guard our three doors. Be aware of our three doors where energy comes in and energy goes out. So we want to think before we speak, which all of you have heard before. We want to pause for a moment before we slap our husband or kick him in the shins. And we want to recognize that our thoughts, the way our mind, even on a subtle level, even though it doesn't get expressed in form, that our thoughts do shape our reality. Our thoughts have a great impact on our actions of body, have an impact on our actions of speech. And also, I truly believe that thoughts have energy, that the thoughts that we have, the intentions that we have, other people can connect with that. And so, again, that's why we pray prayers 3 times. First time, think about actions of body. Second time, actions of speech. Third time, actions of the heart or subtle energy of the mind. Also, there's a great benefit because if you're not paying attention the first time, you got 2 more times to pay attention. And I need that sometimes. So let's do the closing prayers, the last one 3 times. May I attain in each and every life the sublime virtues of existence and peace. May I pursue the flawless mindset of altruism, working for the welfare of others on a vast scale. Through this very merit of mine, may every single sentient being eliminate all forms of negativity and practice virtue forevermore. May supreme precious Bodhicitta take birth where it has not arisen. Where it has arisen, may it never wane, but continue to grow forevermore. May supreme precious Bodhicitta take birth where it has not arisen. Where it has arisen, may it never wane, but to continue to grow forevermore. May supreme precious Bodhicitta take birth where it has not arisen. Where it has arisen, may it never wane, but to continue to grow forevermore. At this point, I don't know exactly what my teacher does, but at this point he always pauses, and you can tell him going deeply within. If you see him doing it, you can see him doing it. And I don't know what's going on the inside, but I have a feeling that he's making aspirations for himself as a teacher, for himself as a bodhisattva, for himself in actualizing what he's praying. I have this strong feeling. And I think that a lot of people in my meditation community have started to spontaneously do that, although he's never taught us to do that, which is the power of what I was talking about, of kind of what we think internally can radiate out. So I think it's a wonderful practice. If you want to pause at that moment at the end of your practice and make aspirations, make wishes for your own accomplishment as a bodhisattva, expressing bodhicitta, which is, again, energy of loving kindness. It's as simple as that. It's the energy of loving kindness that we deeply feel in our hearts. So you can do that, and I think that it's really nice to do that because those type of practices guide us at moments where we don't even know those aspirations. We'll remember them. They'll really help us through certain situations. So that's not written in the text, but I just wanted to offer that up as something that I've seen my teacher do many, many, many times, because we pray this closing prayer, these 3 prayers, at the end of every teaching. So I've seen him do this many, many, many times. I need to know what time it is. Okay, it is 22:12, and did we go way over? No. We're way under. We got more. Okay, good. So now we're going to go into the Shunyata mantra. I lose track of time when I practice Tara, so please forgive me. I have this organized, but I just go way into this space in my heart, which doesn't relate to the clock as well as it should. Okay, so we have really circled around refuge, generating bodhicitta, and the prayer of the 4 boundless qualities. And why have we spent so much time on that? Because that, as I've talked about before, that is really the heart of our spiritual practice, is relying on a wisdom, our wisdom mind, generating the mind of enlightenment, generating compassion, generating these aspirations, and then reminding ourselves of how, as a person who's generate this, how do they act? How do they take this aspiration out into the world? So that's refuge, bodhicitta, and prayer, the 4 boundless qualities. And again, if you wanted to just practice those for a while, there's great teachings there. There's enough there to really chew on that for a while, so to speak. Then we come to the front generation of white Tara. And now I want to teach on the Shunyata mantra, which is the mantra which is Om Maha Shunyata Janavajra Sobhawa Atma Kohang. We're going to go through each of these words one by one. Jeannie.
Is it Sanskrit or Tibetan?
You know, my Sanskrit is not good enough, and a lot of these mantras, this should be Sanskrit.
Right, okay.
But if it's not correct Sanskrit, the reason it is that as it was taken into Tibet, some of these mantras from the Sanskrit got Tibetanized a little bit. And so I know you know Sanskrit well, so you probably could correct this for me, and I'd love to hear what the correct Sanskrit would be. But we're going to practice it as it's here. The meaning is still the same. So I think we can still find it to be helpful, even though it might not be 100% accurate.
Oh, I was just curious because I like to think I know how it's pronounced. And in my mind, it's just my obsessive mind going, right? That's all it is.
How would you pronounce it in Sanskrit?
No. Well, I think that jnana.
Yeah, no, that's
Think about that one, and
so you've got the G in front of the N. Jnana.
well, it's just, but that's what it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I just was trying to make it work in my head is all. So, and I wasn't in any way criticizing.
No.
Because I know that when I've seen Tibetan, the stuff that was brought over from Sanskrit,
Yeah.
I see how, because hum at the end, that's Tibetan, isn't it? I don't think that's Sanskrit.
It could be. It's funny because the hum, which is in a lot of the mantras, the Tibetans pronounce hung,
Yeah, I know.
and here it was written as hung.
But you know, a lot of times that's because the nasalizations are done differently, and you don't even really know. I mean, I was just thinking if I could just see it in Devanagari, I'd know what it was. But
Yep.
I can't. That was all. So maybe if you find it in Devanagari, show it to me.
Do you know, actually one of my aspirations is to find the original Sanskrit for these mantras and put them into our practices for our sanghas, because there are people that would greatly benefit from it. And if you know Sanskrit, there's no reason why you shouldn't do that. In fact, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said that when you're teaching Westerners, he wants the original Sanskrit to be done, and there are lamas that are doing that. But not all of these practices have been passed on with the original Sanskrit. So it's kind of a little bit of recovery work that has to happen.
Oh, okay, thank you.
But that's one of my aspirations to do that. So we're going to go back to the Shunyata mantra. And Shunyata means great emptiness or emptiness. So we recite the Shunyata mantra, the mantra of great emptiness. And so teaching this mantra is always a little bit of a daunting task for me, because emptiness is the vast, great, and profound insight of the Buddha. And it is also one of the unique teachings in Buddhism. So I really, really, really ask you, instead of asking me to be your canoe guide in the boundary waters, again, like I was talking about before, because I'm not proficient in canoeing, and I certainly don't know where the boundary waters are. I know it's around here somewhere. You'd want to ask him. You would want to ask an experienced guide. And so I am smart enough at this point to point out to you that there are people that you should ask to take you into the boundary waters. You would ask him, right? So I'm going to point out to you to learn from the realized guides, the Buddhist masters, and study, or at least dip your toe into what's called the profound nature of the Great Mother, the perfection of knowledge. And these teachings on emptiness come out of the teachings of Prajnaparamita in Buddhism. So this mantra is coming out of those teachings. You can also meditate on Nagarjuna's great teaching on emptiness, which we recite at the end of the Heart Sutra. And I'll just read that. That which arises interdependently does not cease and does not arise. It is not nothing and not eternal. It does not come and does not go. It is not different and not the same. To the one who teaches peace, the pacification of all projections, to the most sublime of all who speak, to the perfect Buddha, I pay homage. And again, you're paying homage to this wisdom of emptiness. So anyone who carries the wisdom of emptiness, you're paying homage to. So Khenpo Sherab Sangpo is planning on teaching the Heart Sutra more in depth when he returns from Asia, and those teachings will be recorded on video, and you can watch for them on YouTube. And that would be a wonderful way for you to learn more about emptiness, about the Heart Sutra, and about these perfection of knowledge or the perfection of wisdom teachings. But despite that, I'm still going to do my best to teach you today about the Shunyata mantra, or the emptiness mantra. So, Om Maha Shunyata Jnana. Is that better? Vajra Sabhawa Atma Kohang. Actually, I love learning languages, so I would be excited about that. So with this mantra, the purpose of this mantra is at this point to clear the decks. Okay, it's to clear your mind, so to speak, so that the visualization of Tara can arise out of emptiness. Okay, so when you say this, at this point, you are remembering whatever teachings on emptiness that you have, and if you don't have them, just allow it to be clear your mind, clear the decks, open up to the spaciousness of not knowing, or open up to the spaciousness that is the nature of reality. So clear the decks. And on a practical point of view, we're contemplating emptiness through this mantra to create the space in our minds so that the visualization can arise. And you know this. If I am at this point thinking about my lip gloss, that's my visualization right now. That's where my mind is right now. If I want to try to visualize Tara at the same point, it's going to be a little bit difficult. So this is just a very practical thing. So clear the decks, put down the lip gloss, and open up the fact that the Tara can arise at this point in the practice. But on a deeper level, the Shunyata mantra on emptiness prepares us to do the front generation by remedying a problem that we have. And the problem that we have is mistaken perception. So this mantra and thinking about emptiness corrects our view. And so the problem is that we mistake all things that we experience or perceive to be real from their own side. We mistakenly think that I am seeing this tube of lip gloss in the same way that you're perceiving this tube of lip gloss. And anyone who has been around a person who's colorblind, like my father, it took us years to figure out why he couldn't see the green and reds. And it was just like we couldn't wrap ourselves around the point that he just was colorblind in some ways. So even, you know this just on a basic thing, that some people, they're just not seeing this color in the same way. We perceive color differently. So that is the view that we're correcting right now with emptiness, with remembering that. So we think of what we perceive as real, and also we think of them as having an inherent existence, a permanent existence, separate from our own perception of them. And this is really important because through mistaking all things as real, as having a fixed reality, we generate a lot of mental afflictions, such as attachment, anger, jealousy. And then we engage in afflicted actions and suffer from the delusion of them. So we don't recognize that how we perceive the world is a reflection of our own mind's concepts or ideas about the nature of reality. And you've experienced this before. I've experienced this before. Like, for example, Jeannie is offering me guidance on how to pronounce the mantra. No, just to take this example right now. And I'm actually really happy about it. But she may perceive that I'm taking this as a criticism. So at that point, we're both we're sharing an experience, but we're both maybe having different versions of it. And this happens all the time. And so then what happens is that somebody says something to you, and you know that out of this confusion happens, and then there's suffering and things like that. So the emptiness mantra is just reminding us that we live in a relative world. And we also really live in the world of our mind, and that's the nature of it. But at the same time, through practice, there's more and more and more the ability to open up to spaciousness, and there's more and more and more the ability to relax our perceptions. And out of that comes less suffering. And that is just something that has to be experienced through practice, has to be experience of actually opening up the nature of mind. It's like if I'm not professing that I'm there, but if I could give you that experience of radical openness and radical emptiness by just putting a sugar cube in your mouth, I would do it. I absolutely would do it, because it would be so much easier. And the reason that we honor our teachers who have meditated for a long time is because they do have this ability to give us the essence of that through their own experience, and they can share that with us through pointing out instructions, or just through, for example, Khenpo demonstrating going within himself at the end of that practice, and you can just feel that he's opening up his mind and making these vast aspirations to really be the Bodhisattva. So we see these things demonstrated by people, and we understand them. And yet, they show us something that opens up our mind. So, Khenpo Katar Rinpoche writes in his book, The Wish-Fulfilling Wheel, which is a book about White Tara practice. He says, with the word shunyata, meaning emptiness, we acknowledge the essential emptiness of all phenomena, keeping in mind that emptiness in the Buddhist teachings is emptiness beyond dualist extremes, beyond reference point, and it is not nihilism. This is really an important point. Emptiness is not nothingness. It is not that nothing exists. It's that nothing exists in a permanent, fixed fashion. And emptiness ultimately is this awareness, is that despite the fact that you understand that everything is arising interdependently and it's not fixed, there's this awareness. There's this awareness that continues throughout all experiences, all these changing experiences. And emptiness has to do with that field of pure potential, and what is aware of that is our awareness. What is experiencing that ultimately is our awareness. So nothing exists interdependently, and everything is arising as interbeing. That roses and garbage concept that we were talking about. Roses and garbage inter-are, they interbe. In the garbage is already the rose, and in the rose is already the garbage. That's its nature. So this is the non-dual perspective that emptiness is pointing out to. Also, so emptiness avoids the extreme of nihilism, that nothing exists, that nothing matters. But it's also not eternal. Emptiness is not an eternal thing. So it's also pointing out to us that nothing permanently exists. So this mantra, if we divide it up into the separate words, which we're going to do right now, is teaching us that in a very concentrated form, which is what the purpose of mantras are. They are prayers that carry the essence, the energy of a teaching. And by reciting them, they can bring that to our mind immediately. So this mantra, Om Maha Shunyata Jnanavajra Sabhava Atma Kohang. Now I'm going to smile every time I say that and think of Jeannie, which is wonderful. Om is actually three. Om is actually made up of A, O, and M. Aum. Om. We pronounce it as Om. And so the first word Om, the A, is the essence of the awakened body. The O, the Naro, is the essence of awakened speech. And is the essence of awakened mind. So already with Om, everything that expresses itself in body, speech, and mind is, at this point, present. And then we recognize that everything that is present is empty of inherent nature. So it's like this fullness, but at the same time, it's this fullness that can be the dance of life, that can constantly change. So that's the first word of this mantra. It is also a sacred word that you could study a lot about. I'm going to leave it at that. Maha means great. Shunyata is emptiness. Jnana, wisdom. Vajra, indestructible union. Sobhava, nature. Atma ko hung, I am resting. And again, that may not be an exact translation, but that is what we can get close in English. So here are some translations from great masters of this mantra. Now that's the word-by-word translation, but I want you to know that great masters, when they meditate on this, start to experience this energy, and how they express this energy in sound, in explanations and teachings varies. And I think it's helpful to hear different translations. It gives you different, sides of the prism, right? Different ways to look at it. So Jamgang Kongtrul, he says, Om, I am the embodiment of the Vajra nature, the indestructible union, nature of emptiness and wisdom. So I'll read that again. Om, I am the embodiment of the Vajra nature of emptiness and wisdom. Tulku Organ Rinpoche, I am the nature of indestructible wakefulness, in which everything perceived is a great emptiness. I love that. That indestructible wakefulness is our awareness. It's with us at all times. It's unchanging. It's what is aware of everything that arises. It's what aware of everything that's changing. So again, we have the union of the unchanging and the changing. So I am the nature of indestructible wakefulness, in which everything perceived is a great emptiness, a great dance of life. Dilgo Chinsi Rinpoche, his translation is, from the very beginning, all phenomena of samsara and nirvana are the unborn state of emptiness. And my teacher simply translates it as everything is emptiness, because that's his great gift. He's the great essence and simplifier. He does that so wonderfully. So, at this point, after you recite Om Maha Shunyata Jnana Vajra Sobhava Atma Kohang, if you have pointing out instructions, and of course I don't know who has them in this room, you would take time to recall those instructions from your root teacher, and you would rest in meditation. You'd rest in the nature of your mind after reciting this mantra, or you can also choose to do some calm abiding meditation, some shamatha meditation, which can completely just as simply be feeling the breath go in and out of your nose and allowing your mind to rest at that point on just that feeling. It's a really good time to add in the silent meditation, add in the centering meditation, add in, take a break from sound, take a break from visualization, add that in. Then when your thoughts become active again and you arise in your ordinary perception of Kate, I'm a solid individual, I'm really here, then you would remind yourself of the mandala of Tara, and at that point you would begin the front generation of Tara. You would go into the visualization. So the Shunyata mantra allows you to rest in emptiness. And I said it allows you to clear the decks. You're not thinking about the lipstick. You're not thinking of the appointment that you have later in the day. At that point, you are clearing your mind. You're opening it up. And if you want to rest in that space, in that peace, it's a great time to rest in this practice. And then we're going to start the front generation of Tara. And we're going to learn about that after lunch because it is noon.